We're checking to see if there are any other officers that Mr. Feiger would want to put on this afternoon, and if not, we're going to do Mr. Jameson's testimony.
Mr. Jameson?
Sir, would you please step into the witness box and raise your right hand so that you can be sworn?
Yes. Yes. Marque Jameson, M-A-R-Q-U-E-J-A-M-E-S-O-N.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Jameson.
How you doing?
Good. Would you please state your name again for the court and jury?
Marque Jameson.
Mr. Jameson, are you employed presently by Sedgwick County?
Yes, sir.
Are you a jailer?
Detention deputy.
Have you been in any way threatened in any way if you don't testify in a certain way that something would happen to you?
No, sir.
So you understand your obligation to tell the truth?
Yes.
Okay. Are you trained like everybody else? What's your training, I should say?
We all have to go through a 11-week academy. It covers numerous classes during the 11 weeks.
And are you trained, is part of the training to recognize if somebody is sick and get them help?
As far as, I don't understand, what do you mean?
Well, just like a normal person. I know you're not trained as a doctor, but your job is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the people in the jail cell, correct?
Yes, sir.
And so in order to protect, one of the things that you're taught and is your job is if somebody's sick, you get them help, right?
Correct.
You don't ignore them.
Right.
You don't treat them worse than you treat an animal, right?
Correct.
If you found an animal unconscious, laying and curled up in a fetal position, unresponsive, limp, would you take him to the vet?
I don't understand what you mean by that.
If you found a dog lying semi-conscious, moaning, in fetal position, not moving, that you know hasn't eaten, would you take him to the doctor? Or would you just put him over on his bed?
To my knowledge, I don't recall dogs curling up and laying in a fetal position.
You don't?
No, sir.
A dog or Mr. Bruner?
You stated a dog.
How about Mr. Bruner?
What about him?
Wouldn't you give him the same treatment you'd give a dog?
No, sir.
You'd give him better treatment.
As in, would I treat him better than I would a dog?
Right.
Well, of course.
So if you found a dog or cat curled up in a fetal position, semi-conscious, would you take it to the vet?
That depends on the situation.
What situation? Tell me. If you found an unconscious child curled up in a fetal position, semi-conscious, not responding, would you take the child to the doctor?
Your Honor, these hypotheticals have nothing to do with the facts of the case. They seem to be injecting some sort of legal standard that isn't the standard involved when I inject questions.
It's not injecting any legal standard. It's a...
You know, you can make that as part of your closing argument, but I don't think it's an appropriate area to question witnesses about.
You wrote a report here, 3/10/2008. Is this your signature here?
Yes, sir.
in evidence. I'm sure you've read it, correct?
Yes.
I was assigned to Rover South on the first shift. At approximately 7:40, after we had just completed linen exchange, in Pod 1, I was asked by Deputy Stanton to put an inmate back in his cell. My first question is, were you aware that that inmate, the Deputy Stanton, had been told that inmate hadn't eaten for 3 days?
No, sir.
Your Honor, again, he's trying to quote evidence, but he's got it wrong, and I would encourage us to ask questions. The testimony that's in the record is that she found out after that he hadn't been eating. And I just, I prefer to just ask the questions of the witness, and I don't think it's a proper question.
This is cross-examination, Your Honor, of the defendant.
Well,
If
you still have a legal obligation to fairly represent the evidence in your questions.
I think I am fairly representing it. Not Mr. Chalmers' representations of the evidence are equally at odds, but I think I am.
Well, I think you should reword it.
By the way, do you have available to you the log sheet?
I don't have it up here on the stand with
No,
me.
I know, but can you go back and look at it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, I don't quite understand. Could you, if a deputy is sitting in that box there, looking at people, do they have a computer screen where they can pull it up and look at what happened in previous shifts with regard to inmates?
You have that option, but it depends on what's going on.
Right. Well, if you're sitting there all day and you notice that the inmate is acting very strange or might be very sick, can you look back on the computer and see what's been going on maybe yesterday?
You do have that option to do that on the computer. You can.
So you'd have that option too. If you wanted to know or make yourself aware of what was going on with Mr. Bruner, you'd have the option of going on a computer and saying, let me take a look at what they did yesterday, or Mr. Bruner was having these same problems yesterday. Wouldn't you?
Yes, sir.
But you didn't do that, did you?
No.
We completed linen exchange. I was asked by Deputy Stanton to put an inmate back in his cell. So myself, along with Deputy Murphy, went over to inmate Bruner and helped him walk over to 124A. Inmate Bruner was acting very strange and moving extremely slow, but was complying with the orders that were given him. What do you mean he was acting strange and moving extremely slow?
Basically, he was kind of like, he was in a daze a little bit. He was just walking slow. It wasn't anything that was out of the norm as far as if you were looking at someone that was suffering from like a mental health issue.
You diagnosed mental health issues?
No.
What do you mean it's not out? Since you're not a mental health professional and you don't have the ability to diagnose what's wrong with somebody, did you decide that what you saw was not serious enough to get a medical help?
No, sir. What I meant was we have quite a few people that are in our custody that suffer from mental health illness. Usually you know who those are because they are frequent flyers sometimes. And based on the actions that Mr. Bruner was displaying that day, it was very similar to the ones that we deal with on a daily basis.
So is your excuse for not getting him medical care when you saw him acting strange? You knew he was acting strange, right?
Yes, sir.
And you thought it was a medical issue, right?
No, I thought it was a mental health issue.
You don't think the brain is connected to the body?
Well, it is.
Well, you think somehow that mental illness isn't illness? Couldn't be as serious as any other illness?
I didn't say that.
Well, you didn't give him mental. Did you think that although doctors are different, there's heart doctors and lung doctors and psychiatrists, I understand that, but they're all medical doctors. Did you decide, knowing what was wrong, knowing that something was wrong with him, that you decided it was mental illness and therefore he wouldn't even get care for that?
No.
Well, what help did you get him when you saw him walking strangely or slowly and acting, I think, and I want to use your own words, acting extremely slow and acting very strange? What help did you get him? What medical help? And by that I include psychiatric or physical. What help did you get him?
Well, at this point, I'm not aware of if he hasn't already received help, because if he's on medication, that's not going to stop him from displaying those actions either.
What help did you give him?
I did not do anything at that point.
So are you trying to now explain to me that you were imagining in your own mind that he was on medication and therefore he was already getting help and therefore you weren't going to give it to him because you had decided that, or you had imagined that?
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is when I saw him, he was acting very strange, but at this point I was not aware of if he had already received help or if he was in need of help. But we were in the middle of doing linen exchange, so you can't. What I saw didn't display as an emergency at that moment, so I didn't feel that we needed to stop everything and deal with this.
So you didn't think he was bad enough to get him any help right then?
Right.
Okay, but when you finished, that was at 7:40 in the morning. After you finished linen, you thought passing out linen would be more important than getting somebody who might be very sick medical help, because you could just put him into his cell and leave him there.
That's not what I said. What I'm saying is during linen exchange, you can have up to 52 individuals in a pod. During linen exchange, there's a lot of people out, and if there's something that's not an immediate emergency that you can see just by observing them, then there's no reason that you can't place that individual in his room until you can get everyone put away so that you can have time to deal with that.
You see, but explain to us then, please. Apparently, Deputy Stanton thought it was enough of an emergency to take you and Murphy away from linen exchange, which you say is so important, and take him and put him back in his cell. She thought that was real important, right?
This is the thing.
Excuse me, please answer my question.
Well, that's what I was getting ready to
She thought that was real important, to take you away from your job of passing out linen, to get him back get a man walking around strangely and slowly back in his cell. She thought that was important to take you away, right?
I don't know what she thought, but what I know is that if he's not going back to his room, he's affecting the safety and security of the facility.
Right, but you're worried about the safety of the facility. How about the safety of him?
That's why he was placed back in his room.
What? What help is he going to get there in a locked room? What help did you get him, ever? That'll be my question. That was 2 questions. I apologize. What help did you get him ever that day, you?
During the course of the entire day, or just at this moment during linen exchange?
Yes, that day.
I notified the pod deputy of what was going on.
What medical help did you get him?
He wasn't displaying a medical problem. It seemed to be a mental health issue.
How did you get the ability to diagnose what was wrong with him?
I don't have a diagnosis.
Okay, so you just explained, you decided he had a mental health issue and you were going to lock him away in a cell and not get him help. But you admit that you have no ability to do that. So explain that.
Explain what?
You say you have no qualifications to decide if somebody is physically ill, mentally ill. And yet you tell us, on the other hand, you decided he was mentally ill, and so you locked him in a cell. How did you do that?
I didn't decide that he was mentally ill. I said that he was observing mental health issues.
Was he appear to be in a daze? You said he was acting strangely. So he could even have been danger to himself if you lock him away in a room.
Not necessarily.
No, not necessarily. But did you think about that?
He wasn't displaying anything that would have shown that he was a danger to himself.
So other than telling your fellow defendant, Staten, that you locked him in the room, you never got him any help the entire day, did you?
See, during Lynn exchange, when you place him in the room, she's the pod deputy. She is ultimately in control of everything that goes on in the pod. So when something like this occurs and she calls to have you, the rover, come in to deal with the situation such as this, if it didn't display anything out of the norm at that point to where something needed to be relayed back to her. So we placed him back in his room and carried on with our Lynn exchange.
And left him there. You left him there. I'm talking about you.
As far as left him as what?
Right, and you just went about your business the rest of the day, right?
Right, there was no reason for me to stay there at that
Right,
point.
there was no reason for you to check up on that man who was acting strangely, who you needed help to walk into his cell, and who you had locked him in. There was no reason to go and check on him, right?
She was aware. We let her know what was going on.
And she didn't do anything, to your knowledge, did she?
I have no idea what was done at that point.
Let's continue on. At approximately 1400 hours, that's 2 o'clock, you were called back to the Pod 1 to check on the welfare of inmate Bruner. That's the same person, right?
Yes, sir.
Upon entering cell 124, I noticed inmate Bruner was laying on the floor in a pile of trash, curled up in a fetal position. I picked him up, picked the inmate up, placed him on his bed, and locked him back, secured him back in the cell. Did you do that?
Yes, sir.
Did you call medical personnel, say, get down here immediately, 911?
No, because he was just laying on the floor. That's not out of the norm.
You're claiming, was he responsive?
He didn't say anything, no.
1 hour or so later, you were sitting in this courtroom. Miss Skelton came in, looked at him, and said, he needs immediate medical care. Was that the same person that you picked up off the floor?
Yeah, that's the same guy. Yes, yes, sir.
But you looked at him and said, I don't need, we'll just leave him here.
No, that's not what I did. I didn't just leave him there.
Well, you can pick up a phone, call 911, can't you?
No, we don't call 911. No,
Who
sir.
calls 911? You call the front desk or the dispatcher to call 911?
As a rover, with this situation, as a rover, you relay your information to the pod deputy, who is ultimately running that whole area, and she goes on and contacts the supervisor, and then it keeps moving on and so forth.
Somebody can pick up a phone and call 911. You say you have to go through 25 people in order to get help for somebody?
If it doesn't appear to be an emergency situation.
Oh, but if it's an emergency situation, say somebody's unconscious on the floor, in a fetal position, in a pile of trash, is that an emergency?
I don't know if he was, as far as his consciousness level, I'm not sure.
Did you talk to him, say, Mr. Bruner?
He wasn't speaking back.
I know. Did you talk to him, say, are you okay? What's wrong?
I don't remember what I said.
Why would you have to pick up a grown man off the floor if it wasn't something really serious?
At this point in time, that he did appear that something wasn't right, but I didn't know what it was.
Why didn't you get him help?
I notified the pod deputy.
It says here, I picked him up and locked him in a cell, and I informed the pod deputy, who was with the pod deputy, that something was wrong. Is that what you did?
Yes, sir.
So all you did was tell defendant Staten something's wrong with him,
Yes.
and you didn't provide any help to him at all. You didn't stay with him, right?
Well, we're not. If it's not an emergency, we're not required to stay right there by his side because you have to go into the actual booth to talk.
What could be more of an emergency than a man who's dying?
I was not aware that he was dying. He didn't show any signs of that.
He looked good, right?
No, he looked like something was wrong. I wasn't aware of what it was.
But he looked like it looked like something was wrong and that he needed a medical help, right?
I don't know what type of help he needed, but he needed some type of help.
And you didn't get it for him, did you?
I notified the pod deputy.
And she didn't get it for him, did she?
I'm not aware of what she did at that point.
You're not
except
aware-
for spoke with the supervisor about it.
You're not aware of any help she got him, are you?
I don't know what she did after that, except for I know she spoke with the supervisor about the situation.
Now you've had 2 contacts with Mr. Bruner. You've had a contact with him acting strange at 7:40 in the morning. He was moving very slowly, according to you, acting very strangely. And now, more than 6 hours later, he's lying in a fetal position in his cell. And he's not talking. My first question to you is, why didn't you try to talk to him and say, can you talk to me?
I don't know if what I said to him when I went into the room, I can't remember.
You can't remember if
I
you
did
said,
know he
Mr.
was-
Bruner, can I help you? Mr. Bruner, what's wrong?
I don't remember what my exact words were.
If you found a child laying in that position, unconscious, that you didn't know on the street, would you try to help them, say, can I help you? Can I help you?
Yes, but that's a completely different situation.
How? Would you you'd have less responsibility to a child than you did to Mr. Bruner if it wasn't your child. If you just found a person on the street, Mr. Bruner is under your care, isn't he?
Correct.
So you have a responsibility to him, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Just professionally, morally. Well, how come you didn't say, Mr. Bruner, what's wrong?
I don't remember what I said to him, but I know he wasn't speaking.
How do you know he wasn't speaking if you didn't talk to him?
I know that I tried to say something to him, but I don't remember what it was.
Well, when he didn't respond back, did that further indicate to you that there was a serious problem? You acknowledged that there was a serious problem, didn't you?
Right.
And all you did was tell Miss Staten. What did you tell her, by the way, exactly?
Basically that he didn't look like he was doing well, and I let her know what was going on, and she contacted the supervisor about it.
You didn't tell her it was an emergency.
No, it didn't appear to be to me. No.
What would be an emergency, in your opinion, other than a man? Was he laying in vomit, by the way?
I don't recall that at all.
Deputy came in afterwards, after he was removed an hour later, and cleaned up vomit. He wrote it. Deputy Hunt testified. You didn't see that vomit?
That may have happened after the fact.
So you think between the time that he was found on the floor and you put him on the bed, that he got up?
I don't recall any vomit at all. No, sir.
Did he ever talk to you the first time?
No, he didn't say anything.
Now, the defendant Staten was aware of everything that we've just talked about now. That he was acting strangely, that he needed help into the room, that he was laying on the floor, not talking. She was aware of all that, right?
I'm pretty sure I did tell her most of what was going on.
Sure, you went back and told her after you locked the door at 2 o'clock that I just found him in the room, curled up in a fetal position, and he was not responsive, and I lifted him up on the bed and I left him there. She knew that, right?
Correct, but the reason the door is shut is because it's not allowed to remain unpropped due to other inmates can go in there and steal items or assault him. So it's also shut for his safety.
No, I hear you, but you told her. She knew everything that you knew, correct?
Correct.
And other inmates had been telling you that something was seriously wrong with Mr. Bruner and that he needed help. Isn't that true?
I don't remember.
Is it possible they did and you just don't remember, or are you saying they hadn't?
I don't remember at all.
Did you ever learn that he hadn't been eating?
I'd have to say no.
You never, Defendant Staten never told you that he hadn't been eating, or that she had been told he hadn't been eating at any time?
I don't recall that, no.
So is that because it didn't happen, or that you just didn't recall it?
I don't recall.
Okay. When she goes on a break, after you see him there, and you guide him into his cell and lock the door, you take over for Staten while she's on break, right?
Correct.
So you're sitting there in charge of the pod, right?
Correct.
Did you do anything to see if he needed help at that time?
I'd have to say no.
Why not?
At this, because when I dealt with him earlier on Lending Exchange, it didn't appear that it was anything out of the norm, so I didn't feel that it was a reason for me to keep checking on him.
You heard Sergeant Martinez was your boss, right?
Yes, sir.
You heard him just testify today that if you find somebody on the floor like that you found him, that's a medical emergency. You didn't know that?
That's a judgment call. That depends on person to person.
You didn't know that? That that's a medical emergency?
That's not necessarily a medical emergency.
So you disagree with your boss?
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that that's a judgment call. That's up to the person that's faced with that situation. It could be different from person to person.
In addition to everything else you knew, I want to establish you did know that Defendant Staten told you that he had not eaten for several days. Is that correct?
I don't remember if she did or not.
Okay. Did you see all the trash that he was lying in?
Yes, sir.
Why didn't you clean that up?
It's not really my job to clean up after adults.
Why wouldn't it be your job to clean up trash that a person was lying in?
Because that's what we use our pod workers for.
Who are the pod workers?
Those are the individuals they volunteer, and they sign up on a list, and basically they're responsible for the upkeep of the pod, and within doing that, they get an extra hour of family visit.
So are you indicating to us that it's the responsibility of other inmates to clean up the trash that you see an inmate lying in?
Just the pod worker.
I'm sorry, what?
Just the pod worker.
There is absent him coming out of that cell and telling you that he's not feeling good. That's the only way you would think there would be a need for a medical emergency. Isn't that true?
Say that again, I didn't understand that.
Well, let me restate that. Were you aware that he had told anybody else that he wasn't feeling well?
Prior to Lending Exchange, I don't remember any dealings with Mr. Bruner at all.
Okay. They call these checks every hour welfare checks, don't they?
Yeah, yes, sir.
That means you're checking on the welfare, the health of the person locked up, right?
Yes, sir.
Who was in, you and Miss Staten were in charge of his welfare, right?
Correct.
And neither of you did anything to protect him, did you?
What do you mean? I'm sorry.
Get him medical help. Neither of you did that, did you?
No, because he wasn't displaying any, I didn't, at least to me, he didn't seem that he was having any medical issue.
By the way, when you picked him up at 2 o'clock and he was in a fetal position, not talking, how long had he been like that?
I have no idea.
Did you ask?
He wasn't talking, that's what I'm...
Was it important for you to find out how long a man had been lying there in trash in a fetal position?
There really wouldn't be any way of you knowing that unless an inmate had looked in and saw that prior to me coming in.
Did you ask anybody? How long's he been like this?
No, sir.
Did you ask Staten? How long? I just found him lying on the ground. How long's he been like that?
I don't think there would have been a way she would have known that either.
Did she ask you if he could talk?
I don't remember that, no.
Did she ask you if you talked to him?
I don't remember that.
She just said, oh, okay. That's okay. Leave him there, right?
No,
She just
sir.
went on about her business?
No, sir. To my knowledge, it was already being taken care of with Sergeant Martinez and Staten.
You didn't tell Sergeant Martinez what you saw, did you?
I don't remember.
Sergeant Martinez just testified a few minutes ago that you never told him you found him lying on the ground in a fetal position. You never told him, did you?
I can't recall that.
How could he get help for something he doesn't know about when you don't tell him? Or Staten doesn't tell him, either of you.
He was made aware that there was an issue going on.
Well, you didn't think it was a very important issue, emergency, so how could he possibly know? How would he possibly know?
He was made aware of that there's an issue. Now, what the issue is, we don't know.
You didn't even tell him what was wrong with him, or what you saw.
I can't recall that.
Other inmates told you he needed to be helped, didn't they?
I don't recall that.
Is it possible they did, you just don't remember?
I don't remember, no.
And you ignored them, right?
I don't recall them saying, I don't remember them saying anything, whether they did or didn't. I don't know.
Thank you. You remember Mr. Navarrete? He testified today.
I didn't hear what you said.
Mr. Navarrete,
What about him?
you remember him?
He looks familiar.
He was in the pod.
Okay.
He could see you, right?
I don't know. It depends on where he was at.
I have no further questions.
Redirect. I'm sorry, cross.
I want to work backwards a little bit. You were asked about when you started with the Sheriff's Department. Let's work back from there. Where were you born?
Yuma, Arizona.
And where did you grow up?
Wichita.
And where did you go to school?
As far as high school?
High school is fine.
Heights, yeah. Heights High.
It's Wichita Heights?
Uh-huh.
And were you involved in activities when you were at Heights?
Football.
And any other sporting activities?
No. I did track for one season, that was it.
And do you have parents in town?
Yes, sir.
What do they do?
My father works at Cessna. My mother works at WSU.
Do you have siblings?
Yes.
Where do they live?
They stay here in Wichita.
Are they any of them in working age?
One of them.
So you were one of the older siblings?
Yeah, I'm the oldest.
Were you, as you grew up, did you help take care of the younger siblings? You have to answer, I think, yes. I understood
yes,
that.
I'm sorry.
All right.
Yes.
And when you graduated from high school, did you seek employment?
Yes.
Where'd you go work?
McDonald's.
And you worked for McDonald's how long?
Can't remember. I don't know, roughly around maybe 2 or 3 years.
Did you hope to go to college?
Well, yeah, I was actually in college before I graduated high school, so yeah.
Okay. Do you hope to go back? Are you in college now? You're taking classes. What sort of classes are you taking?
I'm doing an EMT course right now. EMT course.
What degree are you aimed at?
Criminal justice.
Well, how will you use a criminal justice degree?
Do something in law enforcement.
Is your hope to stay in law enforcement, maybe doing something a little different than what you're doing now?
That's the goal.
Is there some particular part of law enforcement you're interested in getting into?
Just go on the road and then see what you do. Where to go after that?
The
road.
You might move the microphone just a little bit. There you go. I think that's going to work better. We'll test it. You say on the road. That's a patrol deputy's job? You're nodding your head.
Yes.
All right. It wasn't much of a test. When you were growing up, were you involved in any civics organizations?
You lost me. What is it?
Well, maybe I thought maybe you were involved with the Boys and Girls Clubs
Yes.
at one point. What had been your role with the Boys and Girls Club?
I went there as a child, and then as I got older, I actually did like a little small intern with them for a little bit. And then,
What do you do as an intern?
basically, we were in charge of kids, and you know, do activities with them, things like that.
Now, were you ever involved with the Big Brother program?
Yes.
What involvement did you have with that program?
Actually, had a little brother through the program. Didn't last that long because they moved, but
So you volunteered your time to act as kind of a mentor, bigger brother for a younger kid. When was that?
maybe 2 years ago.
All right. Now, you somehow went from McDonald's, and how long were you at McDonald's before you went to other employment?
2 or 3 years, and I left.
Okay, and where did you go to work after that?
School board. The school board. For
You're going to need to talk up a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry, the school board.
Okay, and what did you do for the school board?
Custodial work.
Okay, and how long did you do that?
I want to say maybe 3 years.
All right, so now the next job you had is that with the sheriff's department.
Correct.
You had applied for that job, and then you went through some training and became a detention deputy. Is that right?
Correct.
Why did you want to be a detention deputy?
Well, the opportunity to help people. I mean, as far as doing something different than what I was doing before. So
Did it offer you more money too?
yeah.
What is it about the job that you find most satisfying?
It's something different every day. There's always change. There's something different every day. There's never the same thing every day.
Is there something about the job you find least satisfying?
Just dealing with some of the things that normal society never, has to be exposed to.
And in March of 2008, your position was detention deputy with the county, correct?
Correct.
And on March 10, 2008, you were in that position and had been assigned as a rover. Is that right?
Sir.
And deputies, you don't go to the same pod, the same station each day, do you?
No.
It's intentional that you're rotated about the jail, isn't it? So how did you find out what your assignment was when you came in on March 10 of 2008?
You mean on first shift? That would have been, squad meeting starts at 6:45 in the morning. You show up there for squad meeting, and then they do a briefing over what's been going on within the past 24 hours.
And I asked a bad question, I think, because how did you know that you're going to be a rover as opposed to pod 5 deputy or booking or the clinic or something like that?
They go through a roll call, and they call out your name and tell you where you're assigned, and then that's what you'll do for that shift.
Okay, so you received the assignment, and then at that point you knew that you were responsible as a rover to assist the pod deputies. How many pod deputies would you then be responsible to assist?
As a rover, you'd be, well, where I was at that day, would be 1 South. I was responsible for 4 pods, 1 through 4.
Okay. And then approximately how many inmates would you have potential obligations to during the course of that shift through those 4 pods?
I want to say there's up to 52 inmates in an aggravated pod, which is the same as pod 1. There's 2 of those pods. Then you have 2 direct pods that hold up to, I want to say, 54, 56 people in that. So there's 2 pods with that amount of people in there also.
This is possibly up to 100 people, or 100 inmates.
200.
Oh, 200
Yeah.
inmates. I'm sorry. And could you describe for the jury generally what the duties are of a rover during the course of a regular day?
Basically, you show up. You have linen exchange. If you have linen exchange in your area, you complete your linen exchange. After you complete linen exchange, what I do is I call I like to stop into each pod, find out what supplies they need for the day, any break time that they would like to take, and then after that, you I check my air packs, fire extinguishers, make sure they're all good to go in my area in case there's something that happens. After that, by that time, med pass should have started, and I go ahead and start that. And then you just go on through your day, giving breaks and making sure everybody has what they have.
Are there times in those pods, days, or over the month or week where it's busier than others routinely? Yes. What are the busy days?
Monday's very busy in the 1 South area, especially in pod 1.
Why is that?
You have linen exchange, you have court, you have a lot of, you have personal linen day that's different from linen exchange. You have a lot of classes, professional visitation going on. I want to say there's some chapel stuff going on also. There's a lot of different classes that are going on at the same time also, and there's a lot.
Yeah. Now, you're talking about classes? What do you mean?
When you're in there, you can they have different type of classes for inmates that they can take. Some of them are court ordered, like your Alcoholic Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous. You can even get your GED. There's a lot of different classes that they can sign up for and take if they choose to do so.
So an inmate during the course of a day may have visitation with a family member, may visit somebody like a professional, whether it's an attorney on a case or something of that nature. They can go to the chapel, they can go to classes. What else might an inmate do that maybe I didn't cover? Maybe I got the waterfront, I don't know. But and what is the role of the rover in any of that?
As far as sending the inmates out to their classes,
Yes, sir.
rover really doesn't have, unless they need to be escorted somewhere. The inmates really, they can leave on their own. They don't have to be escorted unless they have something special going on with them. But usually they're not. Someone that has to be escorted wouldn't be allowed to go to your classes or anything like that. So.
The inmates can, from time to time, go to the clinic, either on routine appointments or on another basis. Is that right?
Correct.
And how does a rover communicate with the clinic routinely during the course of a day?
No, they hardly ever talk to the clinic unless an issue comes up and you're in the area.
And so the communication between the clinic and the pod, is that normally through the pod deputy?
Correct.
And there are appointments that inmates have to keep for medical from time to time, is that right?
Yes.
And we talked about what they can kind of do within the facility. There are times when inmates may leave the facility, like to go to court, just testify here, isn't that right?
Right.
And does a rover have some responsibilities on occasion for the movement of inmates when they're leaving the facility?
Correct.
And what responsibility is that?
That the rover has for movement would be to help. If the movement gets overwhelmed, the rover can assist him with that. So.
Is the job of a rover one where you sit behind a desk somewhere with a computer screen in front of you on your, pardon my French, your rear end the whole day?
No, sir. You're typically, if you're up the whole time, you barely have time to get yourself your own break because you're tending to 4 other pods.
Now, when you're a deputy as a rover and you are taking over on a break for another pod deputy, how long, frequently, or how long are those breaks usually?
30 minutes.
And so on March 10, focusing on that, would you have given breaks to Ms. Stanton?
Yes.
And would you have given breaks to other pod deputies?
Yes.
How many breaks would you have given to Ms. Stanton?
Just 1.
And how many to the other pod deputies?
Just 1.
So that's, what, 2 hours of breaks that you provide, is that right?
Yes.
And during that period of a break, is that normally done at any particular time of the day?
Not necessarily. You typically call the pod and you ask them, at what time would you like to go out on a break? As long as you don't have 2 people trying to go out at the same time, you usually can get them whenever they want, and then just whatever time they pick during the shift.
Now, looking at the daily activity logs, I can't find an entry as to when you gave Ms. Stanton a break, and maybe I overlooked it, but would your name appear in the log on the right typically when you have a break, or for an entry?
No. What I do when I give a break is I go ahead and clock them. I timestamp it and write in that she's left the pod on the break, and then when I start putting my entries in, I put my D number first so that you know that is me making those entries.
Okay. If there are no entries, that is nothing that you found that was necessary to enter, then your name wouldn't appear on the log even if you provided a break, right?
No, if I give a break, my name should be in the log somewhere.
Well, the reason I ask is I don't think your name is on the log for March 3 as somebody who's made an entry. Why would that be, if you know?
I have no idea, unless there was a lot going on and I just forgot to put something in.
Did you maybe not have an opportunity to give a break? It doesn't seem likely.
I don't recall.
I mean, the odds are you gave a break and your name just didn't get entered somehow.
I don't.
No, if you don't recall, you don't recall. My question, I guess, is then if you get in and you're giving a deputy a break and you don't enter your name as you normally do, that's because you've got a lot going on. Is that right?
What happens is say you have more than one thing going on and you're dealing with stuff, and then you have somebody that's asking questions. Well, you may forget to put something in that log right when it's supposed to be timestamped, but usually what you do is you go back, you put it in as a late entry, and you put in what time that it should have, the event occurred, but it'll timestamp as when you actually put it in, so it may not be right when that event happened, but there should be a time on the side that says it happened.
But if you have an instance where, for whatever reason, that process that you just explained was not followed, and you gave a break, the only reason that you can think of that maybe you would not have followed that process is you're just so busy addressing other matters that you didn't have the opportunity.
Right, or you just, it's, because what you do is you...
Or maybe it just slipped your mind. I don't know. Okay. Now, what could there possibly be that's going on when you're doing a break that would make it so busy for you that you don't have an opportunity to make an entry into the log?
You could be clocking people out Typically when they do like chapel and things like that, you could have up to 15, 20 guys leaving at once, and you have to check all their flags and make sure everybody's good to go. You gotta check wristbands, things like that, and then you could also have people calling for court while you're doing that, and you gotta be able to multitask and do.
Well, let's talk about some of these things, because they mean things to you, but frankly, maybe they don't mean things the same. I don't maybe understand them, or maybe some other folks do. I don't know. You say you clock people out. What does that mean?
Basically, if a person's supposed to go to, say, court, they're going to city court, you'd have to pull up the inmate summary screen, actually clock them out, showing that they're going to city court, and that way you'll know that he's been clocked out. So say someone has a flag, that guy had a flag that's trying to leave from another pod, the deputy that's in the other pod can pull that up and see that that other guy's clocked out, so he can't leave yet.
Okay, I mean, it is a jail,
Right.
and you don't want just people walking off.
Right.
So you've got to identify who it is that you're allowing to leave your pod to another location, and memorialize that some way so that people know where they're going and where they need to be, right?
Correct.
And that process takes a little time, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How long does that ordinarily take?
Depends on how many people you have leaving out.
Well, I'm talking about per person.
Per person, it doesn't take but a few seconds to pull up inmate summary. And
Okay,
clock them
so
out.
you pull up the inmate summary, you have that, you review it, and you see whether or not that this person requires any special attention as far as the transport. Maybe there's an enemies list or something like that. See what they're going and all that, and then you make an entry in the computer, right?
Correct.
Takes just a few minutes per person.
Right.
But you could have lots of movement with many inmates at the same time. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And you're going correct. And there are inmates that from time to time in pods need to go to the doctor, to the clinic, to get medical care, aren't there?
Correct.
And they either need to be clocked out, or some sort of arrangement needs to be made for them to get there if they can't, if for whatever reason they need to be escorted or the like, right?
Correct.
What's MedPass?
That's when the clinic staff comes in with, it's only one, she comes in with a medication cart. Anyone that takes medication, they're supposed to line up, and then there's a deputy there that is pretty much the security for the clinic staff. And,
What's the role of the deputy, I mean, or the rover in the?
You're the security. You're the one that takes that security role as far as making sure the clinic staff is safe during the med pass.
And how long does it take to do a med pass, typically in the pods that you were in on March 10, 2008? Not necessarily that day, but typically.
Depending on how many people take medication, she could walk in and nobody takes meds and walk right back out, or she could be in there 10 or 15 minutes.
And so that would be for one pod, and then you've got to go to another pod. So that could be an event that could take either a relatively short period of time or a relatively big chunk of your day.
Correct.
Now, you I don't mean to embarrass you, but you have a 2-year-old son, and I know that's not embarrassing to you.
Right.
And you live with the mother of the son, and so you had the child out of wedlock, is that right?
Correct.
And when a decision was made as to what your role would be to take care of the kid, what decision did you make?
As far as, I don't know.
Well, did you decide to be a distant dad?
No.
What did you do?
I wanted to be there to make sure he had everything he needed and to be able to help through the nights, things like that.
So now the mother and the child both live with you, is that right?
Correct.
And you and the mother, do you hope, what's the nature of your relationship at this point?
I'm still trying to figure it out. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Now, what background do you have in medicine, sir?
As far as the medical field,
Yes, sir.
I would say none.
The training that you receive as a detention deputy, it's not the sort of training that would allow you to provide medical care or diagnose medical conditions, is it?
No, sir.
You have the same knowledge that all of us have about medical condition. That is a layperson's common sense. Is that right?
Correct.
And when you are trying to make assessments as a jailer, whether you're a rover, whether you're a pod deputy, where issues of medical care come up, how do you address them?
You use your common sense. I mean, basically, what I do is if I'm not sure of something, I mean, I can ask questions, but you don't have anything. You just kind of look at someone and use your general knowledge and stuff.
Okay. And what, if I put it, tools in your tool belt, what are your options as a deputy if you see a medical issue?
You can call Code 1, which is medical. Basically, just go on, your radio and let them know. Master Control know you have a Code 1. A Code 1. You want me to say the whole thing? You can call it Code 1. Basically, get on the radio and let Master Control know that you have a medical emergency, and they send clinic staff down there. But you usually do that when it's something, that you determine is pretty serious. If it's not an emergency, like something immediate, then you just call, can have someone call the clinic and go that route.
So there's no impediment to calling the clinic if you, as a deputy, would want to do that if you're in charge of the pod. Mine's a bad word. Bad use of a word there. There's nothing that prevents a deputy who is in charge of the pod from picking up the phone and calling the clinic or calling mental health if there's an issue that they perceive, right?
Right.
As a detention deputy, have you ever picked up the phone and called mental health?
Not directly, but the way you get to them is you have to call the actual clinic part, and then they call over there and say, hey.
Okay. Have you ever called the clinic?
Yes.
And if you think it's a situation where the clinic needs to be notified by a phone call, have you ever been reluctant or hesitant to do that?
No.
Now, if you have an inmate who is who's asking for medical care, but it doesn't maybe appear to be an issue, how, as a pod deputy or a rover, is that addressed?
You call the clinic, and if it's not something that they feel is an emergency, then they have the option to sign up for sick call, which is a sheet that we put out on third shift, and then it's kind of like making a doctor's appointment, and then they see you that following day.
Okay, so any inmate during regular weekdays, if they want to get up early enough, can sign up for sick call, is that right?
Correct.
And will a deputy put an inmate's name on sick call under some circumstances, even if, for instance, they call the clinic says, I don't want to see him now, will the deputy at that point put the name on sick call or direct the inmate to do that?
I'm not sure, because third shift, they automatically put the list out, so whoever wants to is free to come up there.
Okay. Have there been occasions when you've been a deputy in the pod where an inmate has approached you and said, I need medical care, I need medical attention?
Yes.
Have there been occasions where inmates, even if they're not in the day room, have maybe buzzed you on the intercom and contacted you wanting some help because of medical issues?
Yes.
And is there some practice that you have that when you're contacted that you won't provide them care?
No.
I mean, in every instance is when you're contacted, you do something, whether it's a sick call the clinic, or maybe even a code 1. Have you ever done a code 1?
Yes.
And the code 1, again, that's where you have a radio on you, and you hit you announce code 1, and people from the clinic and others come scrambling to assist, right?
Correct.
And that's something you've called under what circumstances?
Seizures, people, I mean, it just kind of depends. I've had people, the big one is seizures, I know that. That one's, we call for that all the time, but as far as that, I don't know.
What do you know about, as a pod deputy, what do you know about the medical conditions and medical histories of inmates?
Yeah, the only thing you know is, as far as medical, is on the screen, on the inmate summary screen, they'll have the blood and body fluid precaution, and that's just something that lets us know be careful when you're dealing with them because they may have something that could be passed on. But other than that, you don't know anything about them.
Do you have access to the clinic's medical records?
No.
Do you have access to any medical records on the inmate?
No.
Do you ask inmates about their medical conditions?
No.
Why not?
To my knowledge, we're not allowed to.
If you have an inmate who has a disease that could, the inmate may not want to discuss, for instance, HIV or something, AIDS, the inmate wouldn't want you, it's your understanding that that's the sort of situation that that the rule exists that you're not supposed to ask inmates, right?
Correct.
Now let me talk to you about the pod, if we go through that real quick.
Before you switch gears here, would this be a good time to stop for the weekend?
That's fine, Your Honor. I probably have another 30 minutes or so, and it is Friday. I know I'd prefer to stop, but mine's just one voice and many, so if anybody else wants to push on, that's fine.
Well, if the jury has a unanimous opinion that we should continue till 5:30, I'd consider that. So raise your hands if that's what you want to do. All right.
They're tired of me. Okay.
It has been a long week, even though we've only been at it for 3 days. So, members of the jury, we will reconvene on Monday, February 27th at 9 o'clock. And how are we doing schedule-wise, counsel?
Pretty good.
Okay. All right.
I'll have to visit with counsel about it. That's my impression too, but I'm not sure I have my arms completely around it.
Okay. Maybe you all could talk about that over the weekend.
I'd love to.
When the jury comes back on Monday, we can give them a solid idea of how many more trial days we expect. All right, then. Remember to keep an open mind until you've heard all of the evidence in the case. Don't discuss the case with anyone. Don't read or listen to anything which concerns the case in any way. And most importantly, have a great weekend. We'll see you all on Monday. Court's in recess.
All rise.